I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. All I did was point at a number. Line 42. Emissions baseline projection, West Nevada field. A small lie, but big enough to sink a press release. And apparently, big enough to justify bleeding in front of 17 executives. It was supposed to be a quiet quarterly review. Just board members, directors, and Gregor Vance, my father, holding court at the head of the table like a war general in a navy wool suit. I had my notes, cross-checked, verified, double-sourced from our own raw data, when I calmly said, "These numbers don't match internal projections. We should revise the statement before media day." My father didn't even look at the paper. He stood up, fast, so fast his chair slammed into the glass wall behind him, and before I could say another word, his hand cracked across my face, hard. The sound echoed, not just across the boardroom, but into my bones. I tasted blood before I felt the sting. His ring had caught the corner of my lip. It split. It wasn't a slap. It was a brand, and I knew exactly what it meant. "This is your place, Oralia. Stay in it." No one gasped. No one stood. No one said a single thing, except him. "You dare challenge this family in front of outsiders. You're embarrassing yourself. Again." The word again hit harder than the slap. Across the table, Leo, my brother, the chosen one, held his glass still. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't look at me, just swirled the scotch slowly in his hand. I didn't cry. I stood, calmly, picked up my notes, my pen, my pride, and walked out. Not a single person stopped me. The hallway was quiet. Marble floors, cold walls. I could still hear the hum of the ceiling lights as my heels echoed like a countdown. When I reached the elevator, I didn't press the lobby button. I pressed basement 3. Parking, I needed out, now. Before the silence swallowed me whole. In the car, I stared at myself in the rearview mirror. Lips swollen, blood drying, eyes wide but clear. For a moment, I remembered something Evan once said. Evan Rouse. "Power doesn't always scream, Oralia. Sometimes it just stares back at you and dares you to blink first." He was the only one who ever saw the cracks before they became scars. We hadn't spoken in months, not since I pulled away. Not since I chose family optics over emotional oxygen. But right now, I couldn't think of a single person who would believe me, except maybe him. My phone buzzed. I looked down. 17 missed calls. Gregor, Leo, Vance Legal. PR Ops, 2, no caller ID. I swiped up, didn't answer. I just started driving. Snow fell lightly across the windshield as Denver's skyline disappeared behind me. I wasn't running. Not yet. But I also wasn't coming back. I didn't have a plan. Didn't have a strategy. Just a single instinctive thought pulsing through my ribs like a war drum. This time, you don't disappear. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and dropped my heels in the hallway. I went straight to my closet, top shelf, behind the old quilt box. There it was, the safe. Combination unchanged, my mother's birthday. I opened it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a small velvet pouch. And beneath it, a green USB drive taped with a yellowing label in my mother's handwriting. "For truth, if it ever gets that bad." I stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "It's that bad, Mom," and plugged it in. The USB drive blinked once, then again, then died, unrecognized, encrypted, possibly corrupted. I tried 3 ports, 2 laptops, even my work-issued terminal. Nothing. Just a silent piece of plastic that held everything my mother never got the chance to say. I leaned back, exhaled, and then, without hesitation, I opened my contacts. Scrolled past every name I didn't trust, skipped past Gregor, past Leo, past board admin, until I landed on one I hadn't dialed in 8 months. Evan Rouse. I stared at the name. Back when we were still us, he used to joke that I only dated engineers because I was emotionally wired for logic. I never told him the truth. He was the only person who didn't flinch when I said things like, "My family's legacy is a lie. Or, sometimes I feel like a ghost in my own house. He didn't try to fix me. He just believed me, and then one day I ghosted him, not because I stopped loving him, but because I chose silence, because I thought being a Vance required being alone. Apparently, I wasn't wrong. I tapped the phone. It rang twice. Then, Orlia. Same voice, same calm, no judgment. I felt my throat tighten. I need your help, I said, and I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only one I trust to do this. He paused, not long, just enough to process. Are you safe? I hadn't expected that, not what's going on or why now. But are you safe? I swallowed. Physically, yes, but I just walked out of a boardroom bleeding. My father slapped me in front of everyone. And now I'm holding something my mother left behind, something encrypted. I think it's a backup vault. I can't open it. Silence on the other end. Then, you're okay right now. Yes. You're alone. Yes. Then listen carefully. Take that USB out. Wrap it in foil. Don't plug it into anything again until I walk you through an isolation boot. I blinked. That was Evan. Efficient, focused, no fluff. Can you video call? Yeah, just. Let me wipe the mascara off my neck first. Take your time. I'll prep the environment. 10 minutes later, we were on a split screen. His face hadn't changed much. Same thoughtful frown when concentrating. Same quiet eyes. Only now he was sitting in a workspace I didn't recognize. Bare brick walls, 3 monitors, a whiteboard covered in code. You moved? I asked. He nodded. Nonprofit tech lab in Boulder, mostly anti-surveillance software. We teach whistleblowers how to secure leaks. I laughed softly. Of course you do. He didn't smile. You're not calling me for fun. What's going on, Orlia? Really? I inhaled, then let it all out. Not just the slap, not just the USB, but the generations of silence. The way my mother disappeared behind soft smiles and unfinished sentences. The way Isla, my aunt, was erased after she disagreed with Gregor on ethics compliance. The way I spent years being presentable while being excluded from every major strategy meeting. I told him everything. And he listened. The whole time, didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When I finished, he looked straight at the screen and said, Okay, we don't panic, we document. Send me a checksum of the USB. I'll walk you through a sandboxed decrypt. And if it's corrupted, then I build a brute force simulation to reverse it. I'm not letting your mother's last words die on a file error. That's when I felt it. Not romance, not nostalgia, but oxygen. I tilted the camera to show him the USB wrapped in foil. Still remember when you taught me that during that cybersecurity workshop. You forgot half the protocol, but yeah, I remember. You never forgot anything I said, did you? He met my eyes, voice low. Only the parts you didn't want me to remember. I looked down. I'm sorry, Evan. Don't be. You did what you had to do. Now you're doing something else. He leaned closer to the screen. Orlia, if you're serious about going against Gregor, this won't just be a leak. It's a war. And I need to know something before we go further. What? Are you trying to bring down your father, or free yourself from him? I didn't hesitate. Both. He nodded, eyes sharper now, like a co-architect, not a spectator. Then let's begin. The file opened at 2:16 a.m. No drama, no flashing warning, just a quiet click. And then everything changed. Inside the USB, my mother hadn't stored photos. Not love letters. Not passwords to a bank account she hoped I'd one day inherit. She stored proof. And not just of her own pain, but of everyone else's. The folder structure was meticulous, dated, labeled, timestamps from nearly 15 years ago. There were PDF of interoffice memos redacted by legal but recovered from recycle bins. Voicemails of staff resigning, voluntarily, after closed-door meetings. Metadata from corporate press kits, edited to remove my Aunt Isla's name. A scan of a letter she wrote but never sent. Addressed to me, I clicked it. Orlia. If you're reading this, it means you've seen behind the curtain, or at least heard the snap of it coming down. There are things your father doesn't want you to know, not just about me, but about himself. He's built an empire on image, but behind every clean energy press release is a silence he paid for. I tried to fight. I was erased. If you're going to try again, please don't do it alone. There's someone you need to find. Her name is Isla Dane. My throat clenched. I knew that name, knew the ghost of it, but I didn't know the woman, not really. She was my mother's sister, the one Gregor called a liability in lipstick. He said she chose drama over duty. Said she turned her back on the family. And just like that, she vanished. No photos, no birthday cards, not even a mention at funerals. But now, her name showed up 14 times in the USB's subfolders, including in one heavily encrypted audio file. File name, VANCEISLA call final, MP3. Evan and I exchanged a glance. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. It began mid-conversation. Gregor's voice, unmistakable, calm, controlled. "Deadly, you're not going to win this. You think they'll believe you. After I frame the narrative, you'll look unhinged." Then her voice, low, clear. "Maybe, but if the wrong person finds the right piece of paper, it won't matter what I look like." He laughed, cold. "You won't even exist." The call ended with a click, but the silence it left was louder than any threat I'd ever heard. I sat back. Evan rubbed his jaw. "He buried her," he muttered. "Not literally, but socially, legally. Digitally, he made her vanish." "And Mom knew," I said. "That's why she made this vault." He looked at me. "You think Isla's still alive?" "I think if she's not, my father would have bragged about it. Silence is his only unfinished business." We spent the next 2 hours combing metadata, cross-referencing past addresses, public records, tax filings. Eventually, a tiny trail emerged through an old environmental nonprofit grant database. Isla Dane. Burlington, Vermont. PO Box listed as L. Dane, Solstice Circle. Evan leaned back. "You're going to see her." "I have to. Alone." I paused, then handed him a drive. "This is everything we've decrypted, backed up, time-stamped. If I disappear, you leak it." "You're not disappearing." That's what Isla thought, too. He stood, walked over, and for the first time in months, touched my face, not romantically, not possessively, just steady, present. "Text me when you arrive. And if anything feels wrong." I run. "No, you fight." At 6:34 a.m., I packed my coat, a scarf, a burner phone, and a green notebook. The same one I started the night he hit me. The one that now read across the first page. "Legacy ends where silence ends." I left Denver before sunrise. The city was still sleeping, but I was, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't heading toward obligation. I was heading toward truth, even if it lived off the grid, even if she didn't want to see me, even if she opened the door and slammed it shut again. I had to try, because Isla Dane wasn't just my aunt. She was the only woman who had ever tried to break the Vance system from the inside. And now, I needed her to show me how to finish what she started. Burlington, Vermont, Solstice Circle. A street so quiet it felt forgotten on purpose. No street signs, no cameras, just a row of battered mailboxes and one with peeling paint, L. Dane. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat there for a full minute, my hands still on the wheel, as if letting go might let something else loose. This wasn't a family visit. This was a confrontation, with a woman my father once called a liability in lipstick. I stepped out. Snow cracked beneath my boots. My breath turned white in the air. I wasn't afraid, but I was fully, completely awake. House number 11. Faded gray siding. A sagging porch wrapped in cords of wood and stacks of old newspapers. A dented car tucked along the side, covered in soft frost. I climbed the steps, pressed the doorbell. A muted ding-dong sounded like even the chime was holding its breath. No answer. I turned to leave. And the door opened. She stood there. Not the ghost I remembered, not the villain I was told to fear. She was real and sharp. Hair streaked red and silver, eyes like polished flint. Stillness carved into her spine. No surprise, no smile, just, Oralia, finally. My throat tightened. I brought something Mom left behind. I know. And a question, not about him, about you. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like recognition. Come in, I don't heat the porch. The house was chaos in the best way. Warm, lived in, stacks of books, cluttered shelves, wall calendars from 5 years ago, a whiteboard with corporate names crossed out in red marker. A laptop sat open beside a mug of cold tea. On the screen, a map of Vance Global Operations, flagged in yellow. This wasn't a hiding place. It was a launch pad. She nodded at the chair across from her. I sat, no small talk, no comfort. I placed the USB on the table between us, wrapped in red cloth, like an offering or a warning. I've seen everything, I said. The files, the erased names, the audio. You listened to the call? She asked. Yes. Then you know what he's capable of. I looked at her. I know what he's built, and I know I'm done being quiet. She stood, moved to a drawer, pulled out an old laptop, scratched, slow, heavy. She slid it onto the table like a relic of war. You don't start with what he did wrong, she said. You start with what you did right. Like walking out of that boardroom. Like walking in the first place. She plugged in the USB. We spent the next 3 hours building the foundation. Timeline of violations. Cross-match testimony. Recovery of deleted asset transfers. A heat map of every employee who had resigned quietly, under NDA. And then I told her about Evan. She didn't blink. Engineer. Systems security. Can you trust him? He's the only one who didn't ask what I planned to do. He asked if I was safe. That finally earned a real reaction. Keep him close. We're going to need someone who can kill a system without triggering the alarm. As night fell, I stood by the window. The snow had returned. Soft, unbothered, I whispered, "He won't stay quiet." She stepped beside me. Of course not. Men like Gregor don't step down. They burn the ladder behind them. Then what's the plan? She looked at me, not like family, not like kin, but like an equal. We tell the truth and we make sure it echoes. The next morning, the house smelled like old coffee and fresh resolve. Isla was already up when I entered the kitchen, wearing a hoodie that said, "I warn because I care," and chewing a pencil. She didn't say good morning, just nodded at the laptop. We're locking the framework today. Media contact, backup vaults, whistleblower protocols, and you're going to need legal insulation not later. Now. I was halfway through sipping coffee when the doorbell rang. 3 knocks, rhythmic, familiar. I didn't have to look through the peephole, I already knew. I opened the door. There he was, Evan. Leather jacket dusted in snow, backpack slung low, eyes alert, exhausted. But here, I stepped back to let him in. He walked past without ceremony, nodding at Isla like they'd met 100 times in a war room that never existed. "Brought a Faraday bag," he said, setting it on the table. "And 2 clean routers. We'll run the encryption air-gapped. Nobody's tracing this." Isla gave a rare smirk. "I like him." "He's not for you," I muttered. "Relax, I'm retired." The setup was surgical. Evan coordinated backup drives, one buried in cloud storage behind a wall of rotating identities, the other hidden inside an AI training folder under the name 2026 Recycle Energy Mock. Isla drafted the legal metadata, a collection of structured exhibits, timestamps, leaked memos, and a silent partner attorney from DC who agreed to review everything under attorney-client privilege, without yet revealing identities. I handled the timeline. The narrative, I knew the pain. They helped me turn it into proof. At 1:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Leo Vance, we need to talk, just us, no cameras, no press. Dad wants to fix this before it escalates. I stared at the screen, the irony stung. He thought it hadn't already escalated. He thought this was still salvageable, like my lip hadn't split, like my mother hadn't died quietly, like Isla hadn't been erased. I showed Isla the message. She scanned it like a forged contract. Classic containment play. They think you still care about making it clean. Evan leaned in. Take the meeting. We both looked at him. What? I asked. Take it. Let them show you exactly how afraid they are. Don't go to Bo, go to confirm. I exhaled. Confirm what? That they still think you're the girl who will fold when someone says, family. Isla stood. We'll pick the location. I know a neutral site. No bugs, no back exits. If they're setting a trap, we'll be the ones watching them walk into it. 2 hours later, I replied to Leo, me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., private room. Oak Ridge Law Offices. Bring only Dad. No press, no PR. Leo, understood. I stared at those words. Understood. As if this was a calendar reschedule, not a confrontation 15 years in the making. That night, we didn't talk much. Evan sat across from me at Isla's kitchen table. Coding, encrypting, prepping. I watched him work, the focus in his face, the steadiness in his posture. He caught me staring. You're thinking about tomorrow. I'm thinking about everything that doesn't get said in that room. He set his laptop aside. Then write it down now. Don't walk into that room trying to speak. Walk in knowing what you already believe. I hesitated, then pulled out my green notebook, the one that began the night he hit me, and on a clean page I wrote, "This isn't a meeting, it's a mirror. Let them see who they really are." Later, as I lay in Isla's guest room, on a twin mattress with one frayed quilt and a tiny lamp, I stared at the ceiling. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything they could use against me. Because they'd already said the worst. Now it was my turn. Oak Ridge Law Offices, 10 a.m. sharp. The room was quiet, sterile, 4 walls, no windows. A conference table, 3 chairs, no cameras, no assistants. Just cold light and colder intent. I arrived first, on purpose. I laid my green notebook on the table. Not my phone, not my bag, just the one record that wasn't for them but about them. At 10:06 they walked in. Leo first, perfect suit, eyes tired, then Gregor Vance. No coat, no smile, just posture, the kind that fills a room like entitlement. He sat across from me like he still believed this was his table. Oralia, he said, like he was giving permission to breathe. I didn't answer. Leo cleared his throat. We're here to make this right. Gregor leaned forward. You made a mistake, that's forgivable. But what you're doing now with Isla, with these files, that's reckless. I blinked slowly. So was slapping me in front of 17 witnesses, but I guess we have different definitions. His jaw tightened. That was a moment of frustration. You embarrassed me. I corrected it. I actually laughed, soft, incredulous. You hit me in public and you're the one who felt embarrassed. Leo shifted. No one's saying it was okay, but there's a way to handle this without blowing it up. There's no clean way to handle abuse, Leo. Gregor opened a folder, slid a document toward me. This is a non-disclosure agreement, he said. Sign it and we move on. You receive a settlement, quietly, with dignity. Dignity, he used that word like it was something he owned, something he could sell back to me at a discount. I'm not signing anything, I said, and I'm not staying silent. His eyes changed, not angry, not even surprised, just calculating. You realize if you go public, we will respond, with legal action, with character witnesses, with documentation of your instability. Leo looked at me, not in anger, not in disbelief, but in quiet, pathetic fear. I turned to him. Would you let him hit your wife? He flinched. Your daughter. More silence. Then why is it different when it's me? He had no answer. Gregor did. Because your behavior has always been emotional. Dramatic. Isla taught you that. I stood, so did he. His voice dropped to a growl. You are nothing without this family. You think Isla can protect you. You'll come back. You always come back. I picked up my notebook. You don't know me at all. and that's the only reason you thought I'd stay quiet. I didn't slam the door. I didn't have to. The silence I left behind was louder than anything I could have shouted. Outside, the air was crisp, sharp. I didn't shake, not from fear, but from release. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Now I was free to show the world. I didn't go back to the house. I went straight to Isla's. The moment I walked in, Evan looked up from the kitchen table. He saw my face, saw the fire, and asked just one question: "Are you ready to burn it down?" I nodded. That night we began. The leak was timed to the Jordan Vance Foundation Gala. A press release already prepped. The files already verified. The timeline already secure. Evan handled the encryption and staging. Isla handled the legal prep and anonymous source routing. And I wrote the truth, not just about the slap, but about everything before it, the way my opinions were edited out of collaborative memos. The way Leah was rewarded with a Rolex and I was thanked with silence. The time my mother cried alone in a hallway while Gregor toasted family legacy in the next room. The voicemail, the NDAs, the erasures, the fear. I didn't write it to destroy them. I wrote it because I finally understood. If I didn't speak, someone else would pay for my silence. And I refused to be an accessory to that anymore. At 7:54 p.m., Evan hit send. 3 mirrored servers, 2 journalists, 1 public drop timed to auto-publish if anything happened to us. I watched the progress bar fill, and when it hit 100%, I closed my notebook. The first page still said, "The night he hit me." But now the last page said, "The night I hit back with everything he didn't know I'd kept." The article dropped at 8:05 p.m., same hour, same night, same gala. But this year, instead of champagne and charity speeches, they got a reckoning. The headline hit like a sledgehammer. Vance Empire under fire. CEO accused of abuse, fraud, and internal erasure. Leaked documents reveal years of suppression, threats, and violent control within one of America's most powerful families. Within minutes, it was everywhere, trending on every platform, buzzing through boardrooms like an electrical surge. The names were there. The audio, the dates, the contradictions, the voicemail. Even a scan of the non-disclosure agreement they tried to force into my hands. Nothing was anonymous anymore. Inside the ballroom at the gala, Gregor was mid-sentence when the phones began buzzing. First one, then 3, then half the room. Heads turning, screens lighting up, the applause died, the air shifted, and the silence that followed wasn't reverence, it was recognition. A donor stood and walked out, then another, then 3. A man from the board threw down his program and stormed toward the exit. Gregor's voice cracked for the first time in 20 years of stage presence. Leo stood at the edge of the platform, stiff and pale. A woman near the front row said quietly, "Is that the daughter?" Someone else, "That's her handwriting on the notes." And someone else, "Good for her." Back in Vermont, we didn't watch the live footage. We didn't need to. We were sitting around Isla's old dining table, chipped wood, 3 mugs, 1 victory no one dared to toast yet. I watched the screen of Evan's laptop as the analytics ticked up, 21,000 views, 112,000 in 2 hours, Vance silence trending, and in the corner, Gregor's name flashing in red under a financial headline. Board freezes assets amid internal investigation. Emergency sessions scheduled. My phone buzzed again. "Leo, I hope you find peace." No excuses, no fight, just surrender. I didn't reply, not out of bitterness, but because peace had already found me, just not in the form he imagined. The next day, my name was on every podcast. I didn't do interviews, didn't accept offers for book deals, didn't take the phone calls from the morning shows. I didn't want to become the face of the takedown, because this was never about vengeance. It was about visibility, about saying, "This happened, you believed him, but I have always been real." 2 weeks later, I signed a lease for a small apartment above a used bookstore in Montpelier. 1 bedroom, Brick walls, no marble. No PR team, no boardroom chandelier, just a desk, a window, and silence I finally got to call my own. Evan moved into the next building. He didn't ask to be anything more. But sometimes on Sunday mornings, he brought coffee. And sometimes I let him stay and read while I organized the books in color-coded stacks, because control, for me, had always been quiet. Isla visited once a week. She brought old legal books and stubborn plants. She never asked for updates. She only said, "You did what I couldn't, and you did it without turning into him." One morning, I received an envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside, a single piece of paper scrawled in sharp handwriting. "You destroyed the family, hope you're proud." I folded it, tossed it in the recycling bin. Because I wasn't proud, I was free. Months passed, the headlines shifted. Gregor resigned. The Vance Foundation, quietly restructured under new ethical leadership. Leo disappeared from the spotlight. No one knew where he went. I didn't ask. I started volunteering at a women's center downtown, taught writing workshops, helped survivors build their own timelines, not for courts, but for themselves, to look at a page and say, "See, I wasn't imagining it." To write it down before the world told them not to create their own green notebooks. One woman asked me, "How did you know it was time to speak?" I smiled, answered honestly, when the silence started sounding more like their voice than mine. That night I sat at my desk, window open, snow falling softly. I opened the green notebook again, the first page still read, "The night he hit me." And now, on the last page, I wrote, "This is the first night I don't owe anyone an explanation." I closed the book, not to forget, but to move forward, because I wasn't his problem to hide anymore. I never was.